On Christmas Day, a heartbreaking loss transformed into hope after a rancher's incredible whisper. Jake Sullivan stood on the porch of his ranch, watching as snowflakes drifted down like whispers of lost laughter. The landscape stretched endlessly, a wintry ghost of the vibrant ranch he had known. Once Christmas brought warmth and chatter, his daughter Emily's laughter ringing through the halls. Now the house was eerily silent, a hollow shell aching with memories that clawed at his heart. He felt like an intruder in his own life, battling against a gaping void that threatened to swallow him whole. Should he drop everything and let grief control him, or should he clutch the reins of the ranch that had once been their sanctuary? Jake felt the familiar weight settling on his shoulders, a crushing despair that colored everything in shades of gray. The dream of keeping Emily's legacy alive flickered faintly, but always beyond his reach. Who was he to think he could fulfill her vision? A sanctuary for troubled youth she had envisioned. It was a magnificent dream choked by the grim reality of his debts, struggles, and the skeptical glances from those around him. In that moment of excruciating stillness, Jake felt a whisper swirl with the snow, as if Emily herself was beckoning him. Could it be? Doubt gnawed at him. Was he simply chasing shadows? As he stood frozen, the notion ignited a flicker of hope. Yet the burden of guilt sat heavy in his chest, closing in like a vice. He thought of the eyes of the community, judgmental and condescending, questioning whether he was chasing an impossible dream or merely unraveling under the strain of loss. The breaths came shallow, his pulse racing with every thought, until a violent shake forced him to blink back the sting of tears. Before we continue, I need to tell you about something important that's happening. YouTube has been making changes to the system, and many people are losing notifications from channels they follow. If you're enjoying the content, click the bell and mark all notifications so you don't miss the next videos. And if you can leave a like, it really helps with reach. Seriously, it makes a difference. Oh, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I'm always curious to know who's on the other side of the screen. Now let's continue. But as he wrestled with this inner turmoil, the creeping doubt began to swallow him whole. He could already hear the whispers, companions of the night, taunting him with the voices of the past. What if you fail? As if the world itself conspired against him to maintain the silence that had enveloped his life since Emily's passing. Alone in the barn, he faced the shadows of his own mind, struggling to stoke the embers of determination beneath the ashes of sorrow. Desperation had reached a fever pitch when a blizzard unexpectedly closed in on the ranch, adding chaos to his already fractured heart. The cold gnawed at the walls, and as he prepared to tend to the animals, a flicker of movement caught his eye. A young girl, lost, trembling from the chill, stepped into the warmth of the barn. Staring into her eyes, he recognized a glimmer of possibility, the very reflection of Emily he had long mourned. This encounter clenched his heart, igniting a flicker of something he thought lost. A wave of determination surged through Jake, pushing him to confront the challenge of transforming his broken home into the sanctuary Emily had imagined. Yet, doubt gnawed at his resolve, questions swirling like the snow outside. Was he truly capable? Would anyone stand by him against murmurs of madness that haunted him? As the snow continued to blanket the world around him, Jake stood on the precipice, caught between grief and a burgeoning hope, facing an uncertain future where the answer to his soul's deepest desire lingered just beyond reach. The snow persisted, a thickening curtain that seemed to isolate Jake from the world. He watched the child quietly, her eyes wide with uncertainty and fear. It pained him to see her so frail, stirring a deep protective instinct he thought lost. Hadn't Emily once been just as small, straying into the barn after chasing butterflies in the sun? He hesitated, caught between the warmth of an emerging purpose and the oppressive shadow of self-doubt. What did this little girl need? Where would he begin? The weight of responsibility bore down on him like a winter storm threatening to bury the landscape. Every instinct told him to retreat, yet the memory of Emily's unwavering confidence urged him to step forward. Could he succeed in creating a refuge for this girl? For any child? The flicker of determination sparked again, forcing him to wrest back control. "What's your name?" he asked, his voice sounding foreign in the bitter chill. "Lily," she whispered, wrapping her arms around herself. "Are you lost, Lily?" The girl nodded, her small frame shivering. Jake felt a pang of resolve pierce through the chaos inside him. Here was an opportunity, tangible and immediate. He could be a guiding presence, a safe haven, instead of a grieving figure surrendering to despair. He offered his hand, which she took hesitantly, and for the first time in months he felt the sensation of purpose rekindle. The afternoon unfolded slowly as they walked through the barn, Jake showing her the animals that needed care. He noticed her curiosity spark to life with each new discovery. The goats, the horses, the quiet comfort of the hay-strewn floor. Each moment spent together breathed oxygen into the faded dreams he had dared to believe were lost. Suddenly an idea crystallized. The sanctuary could begin with just one child. All the uncertainty of the future didn't matter in that instance. Jake focused on the present, where small steps could pave the way. He envisioned a space where children like Lily could come to heal, to learn, to escape their struggles just as Emily had dreamed. As the day turned to night, he promised himself he would try, fighting through the tempest of grief. Each conversation with Lily built his confidence, sharpened his vision. He began to map out plans in his head, envisioning a community where he could share Emily's dreams. Yet beneath this burgeoning hope, a shadow of apprehension lingered. What would others think if he failed? The same judgment he had felt before loomed large, mirroring back his fears. Could he turn the whispers of doubt into a chorus of encouragement? The next days would bring new challenges. He'd have to gather resources, confront the harsh realities of his debts, learn to reach out rather than remain isolated and scared. But he found a new comfort in knowing Lily was there, a reminder that hope could begin small and grow stronger. With each passing hour he plotted, detailed the plan ahead, daydreaming of the sanctuary Emily had hoped for, growing more vivid with each sketch. The idea blossomed inside him, a vision that could reshape not only the ranch but his own shattered spirit. Jake paused in front of his barn door, glancing back at the warmth he'd created inside. He could either let doubt seep in and shrink his ambitions or take a bold step forward. The real question pressed against him. Was he ready to face the voices of the past and challenge the perceptions of those who questioned his resolve? Tomorrow would test that resolve, demanding action as he began reaching out to the town. What awaited him might be more than he had bargained for. Would the community welcome his endeavor, or would they shut him down before he even started? The answer hung in the air, alive with potential. Jake awoke the next morning to the muted world outside, the soft snow engulfing everything in a seamless white. Yet, it was not the beauty of winter that greeted him. It was the weight of expectation, pressing heavy on his chest. He envisioned the town and its judgment, turning like gears in his mind, each one a reminder of his past failures. But the image of Lily's small hand slipping into his own pushed him forward, igniting within him a fierce determination he had thought lost to grief. As he sat at the kitchen table, a list began to form. Resources he needed, people he could approach. The reality of his situation crept in. The debts mounted, and the ranch itself felt fragile. But the drive to create something meaningful was louder. He allowed himself to dream. Lily laughing among the animals, her eyes shining with the joy of discovery. Perhaps this was not just a way to help her, but to reclaim his own spirit. He doubted his plans could unfold freely, but the sense of urgency gave him vertigo. He had to act. Stepping outside, Jake was taken aback by the chill that crept beneath his skin. The ranch needed tending, and the animals felt like a lifeline. The physical work could center him, distract him from the gnawing anxieties. He trudged through the snow, preparing hay and water for the horses. The rhythmic tasks, so ingrained in his muscle memory, helped him to organize the chaotic thoughts swirling in his mind. Every shovel of hay, every brushing of a horse's coat, felt like a small victory. There was purpose here, a tangible outcome he could control, unlike the uncertain journey that lay before him. But under that veneer of progress, the question loomed: what if he failed? What if his endeavor fell flat, leaving him more shattered than before? With each new animal attended to, he wrestled those fears, forcing them down in favor of clarity. That evening, Jake invited Lily to join him by the barn's fire pit. They sat on hay bales, the warmth coursing through him like a nurturing blanket. He shared stories of Emily, of the dreams she had held so dearly, his heart swelling with every word. Lily listened intently, soaking in the tales of adventure, bravery, and love. The way her eyes sparkled gave him hope that this could be more than just a refuge. It could be a space where dreams were reignited. Lily, he began cautiously, his resolve looping back to the grander vision. What if we built something special together? A place for kids like you, where they didn't have to feel alone. Her face lit up. Like a club? Jake chuckled softly. More like a sanctuary, a home for fun, learning, and healing. In that moment he saw the flicker of possibility. He could be more than a rancher burdened by loss. He could become a pioneer, building a world where light could shine through darkness. As they spoke, plans unfolded like maps guiding them toward an uncharted future, each word paving a clear pathway ahead. But with excitement came reality, a growing awareness of the obstacles yet to come. Who would support this crazy idea? Would the townsfolk open their hearts and minds, or would they dismiss him as a man still lost in grief? That question simmered, a climbing heat against the frosty evening air. Ultimately, the time for outreach was fast approaching, and Jake needed allies if he were to face the inevitable critiques and doubts. As the fire flickered and crackled, igniting the darkening night, Jake felt the climax of his resolve. It was now or never. The risk was worth the potential for change. Tomorrow would not only demand seeking assistance, it would challenge him to confront the very judgment he had feared for so long. He turned to Lily, catching her hopeful gaze as she leaned against a sack of hay. "Are you ready for tomorrow?" he asked. Lily nodded, her smile firm, yet uncertainty lingered in her eyes. What awaited them? Jake sensed the answer was intertwined not only with their plans but with the acceptance that would come from the world around them, opening doors to new opportunities or sealing their dreams shut. The moment of truth was approaching. An encounter that would shift everything was on the horizon. Would they be met with encouragement or resistance as they ventured into the unknown? The chilling breath of a winter wind whispered the answer, pregnant with promise and doubt alike. The dawn that followed felt heavier than the previous day. Jake stood at the window, gazing into the field where snow settled like a solemn blanket. Today was not merely a day marked on the calendar, it was a crucial crossroad in his life. He was being called to step outside the shadows of his past and face the world, but uncertainty gnawed at him. The very thing he sought to build felt monumental, an Everest looming before him. With a quick breakfast, he squared his shoulders and prepared for the day ahead. The list he had sketched out the night before lay sprawled across the table, teeming with contacts and strategies. He had prioritized his approach. First, visit Murray, the local youth center director whose heart still beat for the community. Then, Callie at the pharmacy, a seemingly quiet force among the townsfolk. If anyone could rally support, it was the two of them. The thought of their skepticism made his stomach twist. Out in the biting cold, he traversed the familiar path to the town square, each step accompanied by the echoes of his self-doubt. How does a man like him, wrapped in grief and marked by failure, approach people so disconnected from his turmoil? Those he once considered friends now seemed like a gallery of judgment. But he pressed on, fueled by the steadfast resolve to create a safe space for Lily and others who felt lost. Murray's office was just as he remembered, cluttered with past achievements and awards, yet the warmth of the director's welcome always made Jake feel at ease. They exchanged pleasantries, bantering about the weather, but Jake's heart raced as he navigated the conversation toward his ambitious proposal. "Jake," Murray said, leaning back in his chair, the fingers of his interlocked hands betraying curiosity. "What's on your mind?" Swallowing the lump in his throat, Jake drew in a breath and illustrated his vision. He spoke slowly at first, but as passion ignited his words, he swept through the ideas like a wildfire. Murray listened, a frown knitting his brow, as Jake detailed the sanctuary for children, a refuge for learning and healing. By the time Jake finished, a silence hung thick in the air. What you're talking about, it's big. But Jake, you know the town has its own struggles, resources are stretched thin. Murray's voice was measured, yet Jake could discern the cautious embers of interest. It was a clear challenge, and Jake recognized the weight of his next words. I know we're up against a lot, but this could change lives. Not just for the kids, but for our community. If we want to heal, we have to invest in hope. The conversation stretched on, each word striking against Jake's own doubts and Murray's realistic concerns. Eventually, the meeting wrapped up with a promise to consider the proposal, but Jake left with a mix of surprise and trepidation. Murray's interest felt like a patch of sun had pierced through the clouds, yet the storm was not over. Next he approached Callie. Her pharmacy was bustling, townsfolk huddled inside exchanging stories alongside their prescriptions. The warmth radiating from smiling faces was a stark reminder of the disconnect he felt. Yet, there was a remarkable honesty about her. He often marveled at the way she knew each customer's name and story. Jake waited for the shop to clear, and as Callie prepared to close, he gathered his courage. Can I share something with you? He asked, his voice barely audible above the quiet hum of the lights. As he relayed his vision, Jake detected a flicker of understanding in her eyes. You know everyone's been talking about you, Jake, Callie said, leaning against the counter. Some say you're out of touch with reality. Others see your heart's in the right place. The question is, what are you willing to put on the line to make this happen? Her question lodged itself deep within him, a sharpened stake of reality piercing through his facade. What was he willing to sacrifice? In that moment, Jake knew there was no backing down. The stakes were higher than he ever anticipated, but he had a glimpse of what lay ahead. As he stepped outside the pharmacy, he caught a glimpse of Lily playing with a few kids nearby, free from the shadows of doubt that haunted him. The sight propelled him forward, invigorated by a new clarity. He also recognized the insistent voice of fear rising within. Was he truly fit to carry this burden? Conflicted but resolute, Jake continued down the street, each step revitalizing his sense of purpose. However, the uncertainty lingered. He was not simply building a sanctuary, but also a path towards acceptance among the very people who had cast him aside. The whispers of doubt lay just beneath the surface, waiting for the chance to disrupt his momentum. And so, beneath the weight of snowflakes drifting down, another thought emerged. Would anyone have the courage to join him on this journey? Or would they continue to view him as a relic of his past? That question echoed, pressing against the growing resolve in his heart. As he turned the corner, another decision loomed. A confrontation with the last pieces of his fear was not far off, and within it lay the potential to either break or solidify his dreams. What awaited him next was undetermined, yet the tension in the air danced with both promise and despair. Jake's breath materialized in the frigid air, tendrils of steam dissipating quickly as he moved through the town, navigating the bustling streets lined with familiar storefronts. Each step felt like a dance with his anxiety. He was still high on the enthusiasm from his discussions, but aware that excitement could easily turn to dread. The warmth emanating from Callie's pharmacy replayed in his mind, a flicker of acceptance he desperately longed to kindle into a flame. His thoughts drifted to the sacrifices Callie had hinted at. He rued the vague outlines of his plan that now rolled through his mind, like vague puzzle pieces, the overarching image shrouded in fog. What was he prepared to put on the line? Comfort? Reputation? Money? All three? He took a turn onto a side street drawn by an inexplicable pull toward Scott's hardware shop. Scott had seemed to embody the heart of the town. Over the years, he had poured his energy into its physical framework, supporting causes, giving discounts to locals in need. Maybe he would see the potential in Jake's dream. As he entered the shop, the smell of freshly cut wood and the faintest hint of paint greeted him. The bell above the door jingled, announcing his entrance. Scott was busy sorting through a bank of nails behind a counter cluttered with various tools. His back turned, the man seemed lost in thought, but Jake could sense the gravity of the moment as he approached. "Hey, Scott," Jake called, trying to sound casual. Scott turned, a genuine smile slowly spreading across his face. "Jake, good to see you, son." What brings you in? Jake hesitated, the comfortable banter feeling far from easy today. I wanted to run something by you, if you have a minute. Always. Just let me tidy up here. Scott moved a few items aside and leaned against the counter, his eyes trained on Jake with an encouraging gleam. With the instinct of a man standing on the precipice, Jake launched into his pitch. The weight of Scott's gaze turned the air electric, heightening the stakes. As he spoke, the words rushed out, a surging conviction animating his hesitance into focus. For the first time, Jake articulated the depths of his need, not just for a center as a practical space, but for something momentous, something that could redefine how they viewed each other. Scott's eyes narrowed slightly as the proposal hit the air between them. You know, this isn't just about buying paint and nails. It takes guts, a lot of guts. People will resist. They'll take offense at you asking for a handout when they're struggling themselves. Are you ready for that? Every syllable landed like a pebble, rippling into Jake's conviction. Yes, I don't expect it to be easy. I'm asking them to believe in something they haven't seen. A change in me. A change in the town. The two men stood in heavy silence. Jake studied Scott's face for subtle signs of doubt or support. He saw the lines of strength etched deeper by hardship, the wrinkles marking years of witness to struggle and resilience. People respect you, Jake. You've been around. I've seen the way you've taken care of Lily. You have a chance here, but it's going to cost you in more ways than one. Just remember, it's not just your heart on the line, it's theirs too. Those words crystallized the unseen stakes swirling in Jake's mind. Scott was right. This was deeper than the blueprint of a shelter. It was a commitment to personal growth, a confrontation with his past that defined him. Was he prepared to become a beacon of vulnerability in a town where he'd felt the weight of their judgment? Determination grew, rooted in the awareness that everyone had a piece of the past they were chasing. If he could confront his frailty, perhaps it could inspire others. But was he ready to face their scorn? Could he brave an open wound in the name of healing others? As Jake left the shop, a tide of emotion surged within him. Relief washed over as he found clarity, layered with the essence of fear and hope intermingling. He had put his ambition into words, igniting a flame that threatened to either consume him or shine brightly. Heading away, a sudden half-formed idea materialized in his mind. What if he could host a meeting, a way to bring people together? The thought sneaked in silently, but its implications startled him. Was he truly ready to open himself up to his neighbors in such a vulnerable way? Surely he was not just fighting for a place but for acceptance, and with every ounce of conviction, he felt threads of connection weaving, pulling taut the fabric of the community in desperate need of restoration. The very idea of standing before a small crowd of people, strangers turned critics, set his pulse racing. Was he prepared to face the gathering of judgment he once feared? Tentatively, Jake determined to seize this moment, to raise awareness for his vision, to bring the community into the narrative of change. But he also knew one thing. Beneath the layer of courage was a quaking doubt, waiting to rear its head. The meeting would not just be a pitch, it would be a crucible for everything he had vowed to conquer. But would he emerge transformed, or shrink back into the shadows from which he was trying to escape? The answer lay just beyond the horizon, waiting to be unveiled. Jake's feet shuffled as he made his way home, the crisp air nipping at his skin, igniting a cascade of thoughts. Could he really do this? His heart drummed a frantic rhythm in his chest, memories of previous failures creeping in to taunt him. Each yard felt longer than the last, the weight of his conviction battling the shadows of self-doubt lurking in the corners of his mind. In his living room, every piece of furniture seemed to echo his uncertainty. Jake slumped onto the worn-out couch, the fabric rough against his skin. His mind raced with questions that felt both urgent and overwhelming. What was he offering beyond a space? Could he truly change perceptions? Could he restore faith in those who might have lost it? The reflection of his old self loomed large, a reminder of the man who had continuously bowed to fear, hiding from life instead of confronting it. He recalled the faces of those in town, familiar yet distant. Would they rally around a man they had judged harshly in the past? Could he convince them of his sincerity when their memories were tinted by skepticism? What if they recoiled instead of reaching out? With a surge of frustration, Jake rose and paced the room, a once familiar habit morphing into a form of meditation. Every footstep echoed the stakes he was willing to take. Callie's earlier encouragement and Scott's firm perspective replayed in his mind. It was about vulnerability, not just ambition. He pondered their words, each a delicate thread weaving into the fabric of his commitment. As he shifted through his thoughts, the flicker of that nascent idea, the proposal for a meeting, began to crystallize. He could see the outline of it in his mind, like a dormant seed waiting for soil. Designating a place and time, a gathering not just for him to present ideas but a sanctuary for shared stories, for raw and honest emotions. That would be the heartbeat of this endeavor. Jake clenched his fists, determination crashing through him like a wave. He envisioned the small town hall, its rustic charm inviting but also intimidating. The faces of his neighbors would be watching, some with open minds, others ready to scowl. He abruptly pulled out his phone, fingers hovering over the screen, contemplating how to word the invitation. But fear loomed, blocking the path. What if no one showed up? What if it became a theater of judgment instead of understanding? "Stop it," he muttered to himself, the words sharp against the silence. He needed to dismantle that mental barrier. This wasn't about him. It wasn't even fully about the idea. It was about the community's collective heart, their need for connection, their hunger for truth. Recalibrating his perspective, he surrendered to that idea. Simmering beneath the fear was the potential for profound change. He started typing, pouring out the intent behind the meeting. An invitation for everyone to share in the journey, to voice pain and hope alike. The act of framing his thoughts met with a rush of exhilaration. He felt a spark igniting within him. But as quickly as the spark flared, a gust of uncertainty snuffed it out. What if he stumbled over his words? What if they dismissed his proposal outright? Cold sweat beaded on his brow as he considered the repercussions of failure. This was deeper than simple embarrassment. It could echo through his aspirations, reverberating through the very walls of his psyche. A sudden thought broke through the mental fog. He had faced numerous challenges in his life, each shaping him into who he was. So many counted him out, yet here he stood, grappling with another opportunity to redefine himself. It wasn't about whether he would fail. It was about having the guts to try. Jake's breath steadied as he accepted the truth of his situation. Embracing discomfort was part of the growth he sought so desperately. He pressed send, releasing the invitation into the void, knowing it might return to him in unexpected forms. By the time dawn broke the next morning, uncertainty still hung over him like a shadow, thick and haunting. Yet beneath that layer of anxiety lingered a flicker of hope. Had he truly opened a door to opportunity or merely set himself up for a deeper fall? Only time would reveal the outcome, but one thing was clear. The future remained tantalizingly uncertain. And in that uncertainty, Jake felt a surge of something new. Just perhaps he was ready to embrace not only his own narrative, but to challenge the entire town's beliefs as well. The moment of truth awaited him. But would he rise to meet it or yield to fear? As the sun began to paint the town in hues of gold, a single thought echoed through his mind. Tomorrow would define who he could truly become. The sunlight streamed through Jake's window, warming the room and driving away the lingering cool of the night. He stared at the invitation he had sent. It was just words on a screen, yet it felt as if they carried the weight of his entire journey. The possibility of tomorrow clung to him, heavy and uncertain, the quiet hum of a growing anticipation that vibrated beneath his skin. As he pulled himself from the couch, a newfound clarity began to wash over him. Rather than allowing the fear of failure to shackle him, he contemplated what success could look like. Words from the night before echoed in his head like a siren's call. Vulnerability, honesty, authenticity. They weren't merely concepts. They were the threadbare fabric that could connect him to a more profound purpose. Jake wandered into the kitchen, each step fueled by a mix of hope and the shadows of anxiety still trailing behind him. The smell of coffee permeated the air, awakening his senses. He busied himself with the familiar morning routine, pouring beans, grinding them and waiting for the dark brew to unfurl its rich depth. But as he sipped his coffee, he couldn't shake the feeling of disquiet that clung to him like an unseen fog. What if he failed to articulate his vision? What if those he wished to inspire remained tethered to their skepticism? It was a heavy burden. Yet Jake recognized that these worries were as common as they were debilitating. He needed to rehearse, to practice clarifying his thoughts. Eventually, he found himself seated in the echoing, empty town hall, each corner of the space steeped in silence. Jake's voice rang hollow in the vast room as he began to speak, envisioning an audience even as the chairs remained empty. He spoke to the ghosts of doubt, articulating his hopes and fears. "Maybe it's time to think differently," he said aloud. "To not just see each other as faces in the crowd, but as individuals carrying our unique stories." With each round he practiced, he sensed a thread of confidence weaving itself into his delivery. Yet in those moments he also confronted the weight of honesty. How could he convince others to join his vision without exposing his vulnerabilities? "You'll need to share, too," he mused, the realization of piercing clarity. Jake wasn't simply aiming to ignite discussion. He was promoting a collective exploration of personal truths, a far harder endeavor than he had first estimated. As the hours slipped away, he developed a plan. He outlined the initial topics he wished to discuss, allowing his mind to build images of faces present during those exchanges. Who would resonate with what he had to say? Would Mrs. Hargrove open up about her own grief? Would Jerry share the shame he bore over his lost job? The budding ideas ignited something profound in him, a desire not just to communicate, but to listen, to connect in a way he had never fathomed. The sun began to set, casting long shadows in the town hall, and Jake felt a resolve hardening within him. No matter how the meeting unfolded, he recognized a fundamental truth. It was a step toward shaping a new narrative, not just for the town, but for himself. Feeling more anchored than he had the previous night, he decided he needed to approach each person with the intention to invite them into this shared space of exploration. He could not control their actions or responses, but he could chart the course of his own journey. As he left the town hall, the promise of tomorrow surrounded him with an electricity that was impossible to ignore. No longer did he feel the quiet dread. Instead, it had morphed into a lingering thrill of anticipation for what might occur. Would people resonate with his message? Would they even show up? Even in that moment, Jake knew he had ventured beyond merely confronting his fears. He was now daring to envision the possibility of a new beginning. Each step he took home was a declaration of intent, a step deeper into the unknown. What lay ahead was no longer merely an invitation to others. It was a call to his own deeper self. As he reached his porch, a thought flickered, a new question that sparked curiosity within him. How was he prepared to reshape the very fabric of his identity through this experience, and at what cost? The morning air was dense with fog, veiling everything in a muted gray. Jake stood before the mirror, fingers brushing over the stubble on his chin, contemplating the reflection staring back at him. The quiet of dawn was in stark contrast to the storm brewing inside him. Today was the day, and the weight of that realization hung like an anchor around his neck. How could he expect others to be vulnerable when the act itself still felt like standing on the edge of a cliff? Each question churned in his mind, tearing at the threads of confidence he had begun to weave together. The invitation he had extended sat heavily on his conscience, and as he splashed water on his face, the chill served to shock him out of the daze he had slipped into. "Focus," he murmured to himself. "You need to center on the message." That's what he had decided, wasn't it? It was about authenticity, about opening spaces for truth. But was it really convincing enough for those who had already buried their emotions beneath layers of cynicism and weariness? After a hasty breakfast, Jake grabbed his notes, crumpled, heavily annotated, and filled with underlines and side comments. They were scattered with his thoughts, almost like a roadmap of his hopes and fears. As he stepped outside, he resisted the urge to glance at the clock and instead took a deep, shaky breath, drawing in the cold, damp air that stung his lungs. Each footstep toward the town hall made him more acutely aware of what awaited him. Would there be an audience to share in his vision? Or would he be met with empty chairs, an echo of his initial worries? The thought sent a jolt of unease through him. His arrival was met with an almost surreal solitude. The building loomed larger than it had the night before, and he could hear his heartbeat thrumming in his ears. He pushed the door open slowly, the creaking hinges amplifying the sound of his nervous breaths. But inside, the unexpected sight of a small gathering pushed him into a space of tentative excitement. A handful of faces turned toward him, each wearing expressions ranging from curiosity to a gravitational pull of indifference. "All right, here goes," he thought, the whisper of self-doubt echoing in the back of his mind. He didn't know any of them beyond their names, but they were there, willing to partake in the vulnerability he was attempting to summon. "Thank you all for being here," he started, his voice tentative yet steady. "I hope we can explore together what it means to share our stories." He felt the energy in the room shift slightly, the murmurs subsiding as he took a few measured steps to the front. He had prepared an outline but decided to feel his way through this moment, crafting a more organic dialogue. With every shared story he prompted, he felt the wall between himself and the audience begin to dissipate. The mention of loss ignited a fire within one person, opening up a dialogue that brought laughter amid tears. Jake listened intently, eager not only to share his own thoughts but to absorb the revelations spilling from others. He was noticing the profound shifts, the flickers of recognition, the visible weight lifting as burdens were unpacked. Yet woven among their narratives, Jake felt a prickle of something deeper, a subtle challenge forming within him. Who did he become in these shared spaces? It was no longer about a connecting community. It was personal, a reshaping of his identity in light of the truths he was now confronted with. The meeting began to wane, but Jake could sense that the real work had only just begun. The wall of anonymity he initially felt was visibly replaced by intricate strands of connection. As he exchanged goodbyes, his heart swelled. It wasn't just an invitation anymore, but the activation of transformative dialogues. Yet underneath this burgeoning hope, a question loomed larger and more ominous. Would he have the strength to sustain these conversations beyond today? Was he prepared to embrace the harder truths, that this was not just an event, but a commitment to a new phase of his life? As the last participants filtered out, Jake lingered, letting the silence wrap around him. The room held the echoes of voices that had dared to be seen and heard. He understood now that they had shaped him just as profoundly as he hoped to impact them. There hovered an electric possibility for change, but an uncertainty brushed against him. Tomorrow's reality would cast heavy shadows once again. What awaited him next would require him to confront not just the weight of his responsibilities, but the deeper conflicts gnawing at his own narrative, tensions that might challenge everything he thought he had overcome. The dawn light slipped timidly through the window, illuminating the remnants of yesterday's conversations that still lingered in Jake's mind. The echoes of laughter and solace were infused with an electric charge of self-reflection. He could feel the personal stake growing in the spaces he had dared to open. Yet as bright as the day was becoming, an encroaching darkness followed him, a sense of looming responsibilities that felt heavier with each breath. He brewed a cup of coffee, watching the steam swirl as he deliberated his next steps. Maintaining these connections wouldn't merely require him to facilitate dialogues, it would demand full engagement from him. Jake realized he had initially overlooked the gravity of what it meant to lead from a place of vulnerability. Was he truly equipped for this? Doubt began weaving its way back into his psyche. His first task was writing a follow-up email to those who attended. He needed to invite continued dialogue, but was uncertain about how much of himself he could share without feeling exposed. As he typed, every word transformed into a battle with his self-imposed limitations. Why was the act of reaching out proving to be so fraught with anxiety? He stopped, hands poised above the keyboard, and closed his eyes, trying to ground himself in the intention that had sparked this journey. "You are not alone in your stories," he whispered into the stillness of his kitchen, jolting himself back into clarity. It was a mantra, a hedge against the insidious whispers of self-doubt. Every person he had met had unearthed fragments of themselves in those shared moments, and now it was Jake's turn to own his narrative. With renewed determination, he rewrote the closing lines of his email. "Let's continue this exploration," he typed, "and challenge each other to keep our hearts open despite the fears that threaten to close us off." It felt authentic. It felt like guidance. And as he hit send, the act felt less like a declaration of vulnerability and more like a commitment to the growth that had begun to blossom from his own willingness to share. Jake spent the rest of the day journaling, piecing together thoughts that had emerged during that transformative meeting. He reflected on the emotions spun from the stories shared, realizing how they mirrored his own journey of loss and repair. Each entry reinforced a growing awareness of his own unacknowledged resilience, a capacity for empathy that had always been there, waiting for a moment of clarity to surface. But amidst the revelations came the unsettling thought that perhaps his discoveries hadn't been merely about him. What if, by confronting his own vulnerabilities, he inadvertently stirred something in others, creating an expectation he wasn't sure he could fulfill? Later that afternoon, a knock on his door startled him from the depths of his thoughts. It was Sarah, a participant from the meeting. She had brought a small bouquet of wildflowers as a gesture of appreciation. Seeing her standing there struck him, as she wore an expression that hinted at another layer of her story, a mix of gratitude and unquenchable sadness. "Can we talk?" she asked, voice slightly trembling. The weight of her request sent a visceral reaction through him. It was one thing to facilitate openness in a group setting, but another entirely when it arrived at his doorstep, as a direct challenge. "Absolutely," he replied, the conviction in his voice surprising him. As they settled on his porch, he felt the tight coil of anxiety unravel, revealing a path he hadn't anticipated. In their exchange, as Sarah shared the pressing fears that had haunted her since the meeting, Jake realized he was not just a listener, but a co-collaborator in a journey toward healing. The conversation rolled forward, rich with revelations and vulnerabilities, and for the first time, Jake felt the weight of responsibility transform into a shared burden, lightening beneath the actions of two people daring to connect. A question began budding in his mind as Sarah leaned closer, fearful yet hopeful, her voice trembling as she laid bare her struggles. How far would he go to truly support others? Jake's heart raced. There was no turning back now. He was standing on the precipice not only of someone else's story but of his own transformation. The moment hung in the air, ripe with unspoken possibilities. Would this be the catalyst for both their changes, or would their fears anchor them in place once more? A deep breath filled Jake's lungs, and he leaned in to respond. The sun dipped low in the sky, casting a warm golden hue across the ranch as Jake Sullivan stood on his porch, surveying the changes that had unfurled. The meeting had resonated throughout the town, transforming not just his own life, but entwining into the very fabric of his community. The weight of expectation he once carried had morphed into a mantle of purpose, one that filled him with a sense of achievement he had scarcely dared imagine months ago. The sanctuary began to take root beyond echoes of a dream. It had blossomed into something tangible. Children were drawn to the barn, each one a whisper of hope echoing Emily's vision, and Jake felt every connection deepen, solidifying the foundations of his commitment. He had proven his resolve, transforming grief into action, losing the specter of despair that had hovered over him for too long. With every wrangle of hay he shifted, every laughter shared around the warmth of the fire pit, he proved to the world, and to himself, that he was more than just a grieving father. Jake realized he had become a pillar of strength, rising against judgmental gazes and embracing the welcoming hearts he had once feared. All it took was vulnerability, and suddenly, he wasn't just a rancher. He was a champion for change. In the early days, he had worried he might stumble under the weight of his aspirations, but instead, he found his voice resonating with a growing chorus of community support. Murray, Callie, and Scott had rallied alongside him, fostering resource efforts and encouraging donations to help sustain the sanctuary's growing needs. By turning his grief inside out, Jake accomplished not only to honor Emily, but also to rekindle the shared spirits of those around him. On this day, tucked under the golden light of the setting sun, Jake stood proudly, surrounded by children chased into laughter by their own joys. He had developed a program that included not only care for the animals but teaching skills, gardening, craftsmanship, art, all initiatives grounded in healing. The progress was marked not just by tangible contributions, but by the soft smiles and twinkling eyes that now filled the ranch, illuminating the spaces once heavy with despair. As he glanced down the path to the barn, thoughts of that first meeting flooded back. An embodiment of fear and aspiration swirled within him. Now it was not merely memories weighing on his heart, but a renewed sense of purpose, clear as the stars now appearing in the evening sky. However, the most powerful part of this journey was the acceptance he had gained, not just from the community, but from himself. Jake had shed the identity that once confined him. His fear of judgment had transformed into a deep understanding of compassion, showcasing the growth that had emerged from confronting vulnerability. Through shared experiences, Jake had fostered a flourishing support network that breathed life into his dreams. All his doubts melting away, he chuckled at the familiar sound of Lily's laughter as she ran toward him, bright-eyed, her cheeks flushed from excitement. "Mr. Jake, look," she called, pointing at the garden they had started together. Vibrant flowers danced under the golden light, a testament to their joint efforts. That moment, the culmination of laughter, collaborative work, and shared healing, spoke volumes about his transformation. Here was a father, once desolate and lost, standing strong in the light of renewal. Jake Sullivan had successfully emerged from the shadows, carving a legacy that would uplift and inspire. With every breath he reaffirmed his commitment to the sanctuary, not just as a builder of a physical space but as an architect of human potential. He felt immense pride and exhilarating joy in the changes he was nurturing, both within himself and in others. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared, Jake looked to the horizon, feeling empowered by the knowledge that their journey was just beginning. He was not simply chasing shadows anymore, or haunted by whispers of self-doubt. Instead, he was capturing every moment, ready to embrace whatever lay ahead. In that instant, Jake understood. This was the pinnacle of personal achievement, not merely building a sanctuary, but reclaiming his identity and fostering growth in those around him. The roots had deepened, and he was never looking back. It's time for you to take a step towards your own journey. You need to subscribe now to join us for more powerful transformation stories. This is the moment to show your support. Leave a like now to feed the algorithm. Your support matters. Don't wait even one more second to share this impact with at least 5 friends who need to witness this incredible conclusion. Comment below with your thoughts on Jake's journey and share your own stories of transformation. Each interaction helps us grow together.